Welcome. Once every month, on the last Thursday of the month, we will discuss the books we've read this month and what are the main takeaways. So we're going to give you book suggestions. Now, this is a month where we've read many books. I've read many books because I was in a flight from the United States, then I was in another flight. So when in airplanes, I tend to read a lot. In hotels, I tend to read a lot. So Mark, let's start with you though. So what was your most memorable book from July 2022 and what's the main takeaways?
Well, the most memorable is a hard one to pin down, but let's say the most apropos given today's climate, and that is a play on words. I would say Fossil Future was one of the most interesting books, primarily because Alex Epstein attacks the issue from a perspective that nobody else in the climate world is attacking it from, and that's basically to look at the knowledge system and the communication of knowledge systems that gives us the information that the climate scientists are working out, and to criticize it, critique it for not only the way in which it does it, for its catastrophizing, something that we dealt with the other day on the personal level, but for the way in which they analyze and process the information and integrate the information. So, and the takeaway that I think is great for everybody out there is when talking about climate, we're talking about the proper kind of energy. We need to have the right standard in order to evaluate how to move forward. The standard, of course, should be human thriving and human well-being. And when measuring the climate issues, we should measure the positives and the negatives in order to give ourselves the fullest context to know what's best to do. So that was one of my main books and my main takeaways.
Good. So, and the way we will do this is that our brilliant behind the scenes guy, Daniel, is going to hopefully split the episode into chapters so that you can find which books we refer to. And actually, if you want to include the links, excellent. Thank you, Daniel. By the way, great. We're so glad to have him. He's going to do it very quickly. So, in order of recommendation, not in order that I've read them. The most memorable book for me in July, so memorable that I'm actually reading it for a second time, is a book by a guy called Stephen Pressfield, and the book is called Turning Pro for professional. So, Stephen Pressfield is mostly famous for his book, The War of Art. I've heard of this book many years ago when Joe Rogan said that he gives this book, he had like a pack of these books, and he gives it to every guest of the Joe Rogan show. I wasn't a guest, it's just I heard it in the show. So the War of Art talks about something he calls resistance. Resistance is, you might call it procrastination, but he goes much deeper on what resistance is and how it operates. And at some point in the War of Art, he says, the most memorable moments in terms of his life going from one stage to the other was when he went from being overwhelmed by resistance to becoming a professional writer. So Pressfield was a guy who, till he was 30-something, he was working manual labor, manual jobs like being a truck driver or picking apples. And he was very unfulfilled because there was a fire burning inside him. And in the book Turning Pro, he mostly elaborates on this idea of you can either be an amateur, which means you half-heartedly do something that you don't really want, but there is this other thing, this other calling that you might want to pursue, and this is when you decide to pursue it, this is where you go. I want to read you only one paragraph from the book because it's so memorable that although initially I had it in Audible, I bought the Kindle just so I could have this line and read it whenever I want. So this is the line about the first time he decided that now I'm going to write. Quote, it's not a lengthy one. I was 31. I had saved up $2,700 and moved from New York City to a little town in Northern California. I rented a house behind another house for $105 a month. I had my old Chevy van, my Smith Corona typewriter, and my cat, Mo. Every Monday morning, I walked into the village to the bank and took out $25. That sum lasted me for the next 7 days. I didn't talk to anybody during my year of turning pro. I didn't hang out. I just worked. I had a book in mind and I had decided I would finish it or kill myself. I could not run away again or let people down again or let myself down again. This was it. Do or die. I had no TV, no radio, no music, no sex, no sport. I didn't read the newspaper. For breakfast, I had liver and eggs. I was like Rocky. And then he says that when he would run out of money, he would go, he would pick some apples somewhere else as a seasonal labor, and then he would return and he would go back to his book. And the manuscript did not find a publisher. He wrote then a second book. Again, he did not find a publisher, but it doesn't matter. Why? Because he had learned what it meant to properly work. So some people might find it cheesy. The guy is definitely, particularly in the world of art, there's a lot of mystic stuff, but I found it super exciting. And I was very happy to hear Charles Fanny, the CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute, recommending Turning Pro in some inside meetings recently. So my first recommendation of the book of the month, Steven Pressfield, Turning Pro. It has 100 very, very short chapters. Some chapters are like half a page. Definitely recommend it also in Audible because the way he reads it, or whoever the narrator is, it's very, very good. You can read it or listen to it within 2 hours. Back to you, Mark.
So, I mean, for anybody who's a history buff, this book may appeal to you. It was inspired by an unfortunate interaction on Facebook with someone who was educated in a university in Portland, who's been basically at war with Western civilization and with the founding fathers in particular. Right now, it's very hip to denigrate the founding fathers. It's becoming actually part of not only curriculum, but if you were to visit Monticello, Jefferson's home, or Montpelier, Madison's home, you would not primarily, the discussion would not primarily revolve around their achievements, but around all of the bad things that they did, which were like their culture. Now, I first have to say that I think what makes a historical figure historical is the degree to which they rise above the culture and do something extraordinary. And we have to understand that the founders were a part of their culture, and we can't do what's called presentism with them and judge them necessarily in every area by modern standards. And so to that degree, there's a book called Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy by Annette Gordon Reed. What I like about this is it doesn't go the route of either denial or criminalization and denigration. It doesn't paint Jefferson as a psychopathic child molesting creep. And it doesn't go and say that Sally Hemings never had a relationship with Thomas Jefferson. Instead, it takes the bulk of the evidence. A lot of it are disparate facts that you have to sort of assemble, right, through induction and make a presumption that something happened between the two of them. And it asserts that there's a possibility that this 38-year-long relationship was actually a real thing. Thomas Jefferson made a promise to Martha Randolph, his wife, that he would never marry again. Now, that's a huge thing for somebody. She died very young in their relationship. And for him to go for the remainder of his life without having a relationship with somebody else, without marrying somebody else, and it had been with a white woman, he probably would have been under the obligation to break his vow to his wife. But that the relationship between these two people might not have been pathological despite the surrounding, unfortunate narrative, that it might have actually been cemented by real affection and real concern for each other, enough that he freed all of the Hemings, when he agreed to, and even Sally as well. is an interesting take on this, that there might have been an affair of real connection between the two of them that was shackled only by social perspectives at the time. And I think anybody who, lots of people can put themselves in that position throughout history, having forbidden relationships where love, you just love the person, but it goes against the social mores. And I don't know, it was a very interesting take to me, and I think it's worth looking at.
Good. And I see we have Amanda. Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
So I didn't see what time exactly you joined us. So we've already covered one book from Amanda has frozen. No, I hear you are back again. So we've done one book from myself and two books from Mark. So I did I did Turning Pro. Mark did Fossil Futures, and Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, a brief account. So the question is, what is your number one book recommendation from what you've read in July, and what's the main takeaway?
Okay, so once again, I'm feeling pretty ill-prepared for this discussion, because my number one recommendation from what I read in July is The Three Musketeers. So
are you kidding?
Different.
No, that's great.
Okay.
I mean, I've read The Count of Monte Cristo. I haven't gone to Three Musketeers, but come on, man, that's awesome literature.
Okay, good. All right. So the thing that I love about that book, and it was my favorite book when I was a kid too, and I read the whole series. There's so many good things about that book. One thing I really love is that there's all these different characters to pick from, and pick from isn't like, you can think of who's your favorite, and that's kind of was my favorite thing to do when I was a kid, is like, oh no, this week it's D'Artagnan because isn't he cool because he did this or that, and then like, no, Aramis.
Wait, isn't D'Artagnan the fourth?
Yeah, he's the fourth, so yeah, but you can like D'Artagnan. He's the one that the story centers around. Or Aramis is my favorite because he's my all-time favorite if I had to choose just one. Porthos has never been my favorite, so I don't know what's going on with him.
and who is the third? Porthos, Aramis?
Athos.
Athos, yeah.
Yeah, which I assume is short for Chrysanthos or something, but yeah, so Athos is pretty cool too. Anyway, I like it's romantic. It's the swashbuckling tale. D'Artagnan is, he's the young guy trying to find his way in the world and coming to a new place and trying to hook up with I don't know, to find adventure. And I just love that. So that's my recommendation is the Three Musketeers.
Check first Amanda does recommendation, The Three Musketeers. So second, Nikos' recommendation. So I will go for a book that I've read is about money. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Now, the context is that I read this book after I read another very famous book about money, which is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad, Poor Dad didn't really vibe with me at all. I understand some of the things that it said could be useful, but I didn't sense that this book had something to tell me. The Psychology of Money was the opposite. It was a breath of fresh air. So what is the main message of The Psychology of Money? The main message is that any advice that you might get about money, you need to keep in mind that it's contextual. It has to do with who you are. What do you want out of life? Because different people might want completely different things. For example, the author says something that I've never heard anyone in the world say, which is that he bought his house without getting a mortgage. I like this so much because I like this idea that I don't owe anything to the bank. So the author said, when I did so, everyone told me I'm stupid. I completely understood that why it didn't make sense financially to do so. But he said, for me, the number one investment guidance is how I sleep at night. So he gives this framework of you make your financial decisions based on what is the context of your life. Then he says something else which is very, very interesting, which is that if you think about it, we all the time we talk about disaster, impending crisis, and all that stuff. However, he says, at any given point in time, you have almost 100% chance of getting your money back in the stock exchange within 20 years. And 50-50 when you invest and it's, let's say, a one-day period. And as the period where you expect returns grows from a month to a year to 10 years to 20 years, your odds rise as well. So what he says is, we think about crisis because crisis happens like that in a snap, but progress happens by accumulation and it happens gradually, and therefore we don't notice it. So basically, his advice is, have a strategy that works for you, save money, put money aside, and invest something, and in the long term, it's going to be okay. Something else which really resonated with me, he says, when people tell you don't save money in the bank because the interest rate is very low, they don't take into account something very important, which is that money in the bank means that you have the peace of mind, which you cannot put a price tag on it, that if something bad happens, you can handle with it. It gives you the freedom to change career without worrying if your boss fires you or if you can't find a job for 3-6 months. So again, and also it gives you the time, it gives you the opportunity to rethink your life from a higher altitude, that I am covered, I've got somewhere to fall. So this is a way of thinking that definitely resonated with me. It was a breath of fresh air. I agree completely with his take. It resonates with my character. He says it's okay to take risks, but never take catastrophic risks. And he puts into a very good perspective how your values can relate with how you think about money. So in a world where most of economic gurus say things like buy a house or don't leave your money in the bank or invest in the latest trend, he basically says, relax, save, go slow, you're going to be fine. And I liked it a lot. Again, the book is called The Psychology of Money by Morgan, I think he's pronounced Housel. And it's quite a mainstream book, so it's a very popular, it's a bestseller, which means that other people found this also helpful. So it's not that I'm very conservative with my approach to money, and that's how I liked it. So before we go to further recommendations, let's go to the super chat. It's good that I see many people are finding this discussion interesting. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for your contribution. Roland says, I've been reading Antigone and Hugo's Bag Yargal. Hugo's book, that guy is pronounced differently in Greece. I hope I didn't butcher it. Antigone, we did it in school. And here's a story about how horrible school in Greece is. We never did the story from the beginning to the end. It was some random parts from the middle of the book. So this is why, anyway, don't even get me started about how ancient tragedy is taught at school. But more power to you. Antigone is a brilliant story. Marilyn says, I just listened to Turning Pro. Tal recommended it. Yes. So again, Turning Pro is very good, also in Audible. So give it a shot. Ali says, I just finished Atlas Shrugged about 10 minutes ago. Congratulations. Reading Clarence B. Carson now. He has an interesting library of works to read. Thanks, Ali. I'm going to check it out. I haven't read something from that. And Marlon also says, I'm reading Dante's Divine Comedy, Foundations of a Free Society. This is a collection with essays by some objectivist thinkers. And The Child is the Teacher, a biography of Maria Montessori. So Marlon is getting after it in July, reading 4 books in a month, which is great. Keep it up. Okay. So, Mark, you've already suggested 2 books. So, Amanda, have you got a second suggestion, or shall we go for Mark's third suggestion?
I can give you a second suggestion.
Let's go.
Even though it's, again, maybe sounds pretty different from the things you're suggesting. Okay. So it's this book called The Prism and the Pendulum.
The Prism and the Pendulum. I'm asking because we're putting them also on the link.
And the author is Robert P. Grease, but it's like not like Greece is in the country. It's more like grease is in the substance that you use in your car.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This book is about experiments, like beautiful seminal experiments that have happened in physics. So it's like the Cavendish experiment, which, you know, wanted to make a measurement about like how much gravity is there, or like how strong is it. There's the experiment, Galileo's Bell plane, where he figures out that like essentially like what is acceleration and how does gravity work? Is it a constant, and is it increase, or like what does that look like? Foucault's pendulum, which is the first part, or the part of the title, that's the pendulum that it refers to, where you can see it. Oh my gosh, the earth turns. And the thing that I love about the book is the author's perspective. So he says that and I also think this too, that there's something about art, right? When you look at a great work of art, it's, whoa, you get this feeling that of whatever it is that the artist is trying to tell you. Maybe it's, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be amazing to be a hero like that, or to fall in love in that way. And there's something also beautiful about certain experiments that also give you like that direct visual access to this wonderful world that you didn't know existed. And I want to give you an example if that's cool. So there's this experiment, and I'll just say that when I go through this in class, I usually, tease it out and let you figure it out a little bit more, but I'll just give you the sort of the punchline. So Galileo, he wanted to figure out like how do things accelerate, or how do things move when you drop them. And part of the problem is like, if you drop something, especially in like 1604 when he lived, like you can't time it. First of all, you don't have like a stopwatch, and even if you did, it's not like the most accurate. It's hard. Things fall very, very fast, and even if you were to chuck things off of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, how are you going to do it? How are you going to figure, like, do you have a guy on the ground? Is he going to have a pendulum? I don't know how you're going to make these accurate measurements. And so, like, what do you do given that? And you might, and like the answer, well, what if you could slow it down, right? Wouldn't that be amazing? And like, but how would you do that? Okay, would you maybe drop things through water? No, that doesn't make sense, because now you're introducing some other thing into the experiment, like the friction of water, and maybe that's not going to be helpful. But Galileo figures out a really clever way to slow gravity down, and also to make it visually apparent to anybody who sees the experiment how gravity works. And it's called Galileo's Bell plane. So what he does is he takes a plane, so a ramp, which is his way of slowing gravity down, right? Instead of a ball dropping from here to the ground, it rolls down the ramp. Now, technically, it should slide down the ramp. That would be even better, but rolling is just as good. And what he does is he puts a number of wickets. Like a wicket is like the thing that you would use in croquet where the ball goes through. And on each wicket is a bell. And he positions these wickets so that as the ball rolls down the plane, the bells ring in an even tempo or even rhythm. And in order to do this, you have to have like the first space is this much, and then the next space is shorter and shorter and shorter in a certain pattern, and then you can see how the acceleration of gravity works, and it's beautiful, because anyone who sees that experiment, I mean, it's not just seeing, but you hear it. You hear the bells ringing in succession and even rhythm, and you see that, oh yeah, that this space is bigger, and you can make that measurement easily, right? Like a ruler, no problem, to measure and compare the distances. And there's something so beautiful about that he took something that was hidden and that was, a fact of reality, that it's there, and he made it explicit in the same way that like art might do that. And anyway, the author goes through a whole bunch of experiments that are just as beautiful and just as interesting. So if you're into physics, maybe check that one out.
I love objectivity so much. So the one recommendation, the Three Musketeers, the other one about experiments in physics. Like, where else can you find this combination? So, Mark, suggestion number 3. By the way, we're going to stop at 3 each, because let's keep this relatively short.
Sure.
Oh,
the
dang.
episode.
So then I'm going to skip my Mortimer Adler recommendation. I'll just say it, but I won't talk about it. Aristotle for Everybody, I think, is good. I think anything from Mortimer Adler is very good, including How to Read a Book, which I'm in the middle of, and The Closing of the American Mind, where he was very, very far ahead of the flaws in education and what that was doing to the American consciousness. But this third recommendation is going to include two books as well, because one book was referred to inside the other. The first book that I'm going to recommend is The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution. You can see I have sort of a theme to my reading, by Bernard Bailyn. Since 1619 Project sort of told us that there was in fact not the desire to be free in America, but the desire to maintain the institution of slavery is what motivated the revolution. And so it's great to see that the thinking for the revolution began sort of after the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, when the English started to exercise greater powers over the colonies to pay for that war. And people started to think about what that meant and how that evolved from first, taxation without representation and being English citizens who had, rights under common law of England, to the individualism that is uniquely American. And this was an evolution of over 10 years or 11 years in the making. And there's thousands upon thousands of documents that attest to it. Nowhere in there is there the mention that slavery is the reason for us breaking with the mother country. In fact, the evolution of the idea from English citizen to American individual, if anything, was a glaring paradox for the institution of slavery and served for conflict from the beginning, but which came to a head, of course, in the American Civil War. But there's a book recommended within this book. The excerpt was so interesting that I had to read the book. It's called Private Yankee Doodle by J.P. Martin. He was, if you want to hear a first-person narrative of the Revolutionary War, and of course, he was in Pennsylvania, New York, and during most of it, and he has his own unique experiences. So it's really a microcosm of the war. But he has such a unique take, a unique voice, and he's so funny and interesting that it's sort of like listening to a guy tell war stories around a campfire, and putting some of the most horrible things that he had to experience, which for the militia, I believe he was in the Connecticut militia, or he was a Yankee, so he was from Boston. But the militia endured such privation, starvation and freezing temperatures and basically naked all the time. But when he talks about the things that they did, he makes some of these terrible experiences actually funny to read and enjoyable, and you become a comrade in arms with him while you're reading them. So I would recommend those two books very, very highly.
Can you repeat the titles for our producer?
Bernard Bailyn wrote The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, and Private Yankee Doodle by J.P. Martin.
Good. So my third recommendation, I'll go for this one. So I read a book by a guy called Tim Kennedy, who was a special forces operator and a martial artist, called
I loved him.
Sorry?
I loved him. I follow him on Twitter.
He's good, yeah. And it's called Stars and Stripes. So he's a decorated special forces soldier. He's been to Iraq, to Afghanistan. He's been an MMA fighter, and he goes through his life. Now, I'll tell you what I liked and what I didn't really connect very well. So what I liked is the insight on how some people can operate on a completely different mode. So when you think that your life has these limitations, like, oh, I'm tired, or, oh, this is risky, you read the life of someone like Tim Kennedy and you realize, okay, life has so much more that is possible, so much more potential, or the stage at which I operate can be so much different from where I currently am. the thing I didn't really connect is that he made it, supposedly the book is about his struggles and how many times he failed and the hell of war and how he, in some battles, the difficulty and the trauma and all that stuff. But still, he made it sound almost not easy, but he's so larger than life that it is kind of different to relate to him. So he makes it sound easy, let's say, overcoming the fear and overcoming the difficulties of doing absolutely crazy things, because he's also been a firefighter, he's been a stuntman, cascadeur, how it's called, and he's an absolutely unbelievable personality. But I compare this book, for example, with David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. With Goggins, I could relate a bit more, kind of feel the pain, the stress. With Tim Kennedy, it's like he's almost too perfect as a human being of overcoming fear and of doing unbelievable things, that I don't kind of get this, okay, I could also do that. But my main takeaway is the last chapter of the book, where he talks about so when Kabul fell last summer, he was part of a mission of volunteer citizens who flew back there to save American citizens and allies. And this is a chapter of heroism that we still don't know enough. So I've read stories that completely surprised me, that I was in awe. I was in disbelief that people can pull off such a heroism in a time where everyone is so nihilistic and everyone is so kind of shrugging, whatever, what can you do? So his idea was, no, we cannot leave these people behind. So he goes there and he pulls off some very, very difficult missions to save the people that he thought he needs to save. So Tim Kennedy is the author, and the book is called Stars and Stripes. Very enjoyable reading. And again, you will see your comfort zone under a very different prism by reading Tim Kennedy. Amanda, your third recommendation.
It was right outside my door, so I wanted to get it. It's called Stories in Paint by Luke Travers.
Wait. No, actually continue. It was one of my options on whether I would read it as well.
Okay, yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna hug this book because I love it. I love it so much. If it, if it was just that he, like, Luke just gave me these beautiful paintings, like selected them for me to look at, like that would be already just a huge value. But yeah, I love everything about this book. He takes you through the story of what's in the paintings and helps you to figure out, if you were to look at a painting that resonated with you, could you figure out what the story is and ask yourself the right questions to figure that out. So yeah, I love his perspective on art. I learned so much about it, and it's like, I think of it really as a gift. I mean, I know I paid for the book, but I should have paid like way more for the value that I got from it. Because yeah, I mean, I talked about art a little bit with the Prism and the Pendulum book. This is similar for me, where it's the experience of someone who's captured an emotion or captured something important about about what it means to be human, and the struggles and the triumphs and the situations and the contemplation of the world, and put it into a painting, and it's like waiting for you to discover. It's almost like, it's not a secret message because it's there, but it's like most people don't see the message, and they don't take the time maybe, or they don't understand how to like read in that language or see in that wavelength. And this sort of this book makes like a whole hidden world, accessible and explicit. And it's such a wonderful and a beautiful world. So check it out.
I couldn't agree more. So the book is Stories in Paint by Luke Travers. So Luke is he's many things, but he's doing some museum guides, some art guides, and he's so good that he has written a book about it. So the book is Touching the Art, a guide to enjoying art in a museum. So I forgot that I read this as well in July. I liked it so much that when I was in London, I wanted to visit again the National Gallery. I went there, but there was a large queue and I had to catch a train. But anyway, if you're like me and you cannot not focus, immerse yourself in appreciating art, this book is the answer. I haven't started Stories in Pain yet, but I'm sure it's going to be of equal. It's majestic. I cannot find any other way to put it.
Here's the thing: like, you don't even have to read this book. You can just look at the pictures.
Yeah, it has a 15.
What more do you want?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's also on Amazon. It probably is, but we got it in Ocon. But it's worth it. It's worth it. Okay, so finishing with super chat. So Robert says, great topic. Thank you, Robert. Could be a great monthly feature. It will be last Thursday of every month. Just did the show on Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I'm gonna check it out because I wanted to read I wanted to read Ryan Holiday because I follow him on social media. He's a Stoic. Next up on today's show, Men Who Hate Women. So this is a book about incels, I assume, and I've heard interesting things about it. Ali says, thank you, Ali. 2 messages by Ali. I did finish Fossil Future myself. I like the book, but there's nothing racist or hate bashing on Washington Pro just for the sake of it in the book. This has to do with the controversy with Washington Post taking a hit job on Alex. Alex just speaks the truth. I would like to read the follow-up. You can read the prequel, The Moral Case, if you haven't. It's also very good. So, and the book that you mentioned earlier, The Fateful Turn by Clarence B. Carson. So Clarence B. Carson is a historian.
That's good. I love him.
He's written a whole series that takes the United States from the beginning till the end, the history. So if at some point I want to dive into American history, which is a great gap in my historic knowledge, I'm going to jump on it. So, and thank you, Christopher, for your contribution. We appreciate it. So our cool producer has put a poll on YouTube, and 8% of you have read more than 5 books in July. Add myself to that, more than almost 10%. So, and 50% of you at least 1 or 2 books. Excellent. So Marilyn says, I first went on one of Luke's art tours 11 years ago. I've since been on many more on his tour. He's deepened my appreciation of art a lot. Exactly. And you hear people like Yaron Brook who told you how they got into art, and they talk about the mentors they had. I never had such a mentor. So I'm getting a virtual or a remote mentor in Luke Travers, who I've met in Ocon for like 2 minutes. I don't know him well, but his enthusiasm on art is contagious. So he talked to me about these books for like 15 seconds, literally 15 to 20 seconds. This book also has a companion where you scan the picture and you get like a short audio where he talks about it. I was literally sold within 20 seconds. And our producer says he played soccer with Luke at Ocon, or how we call it, football. Anyway, super fun today. We're going to continue, and we're going to do it every last Friday or every last Thursday of the month. Upcoming tonight, 10 p.m. UK time, with Robert and Amy, Men Who Hate Women and the Rational Response. So basically, it is Books Day. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Daniel. You're a great producer. Thanks to our audience. Bye-bye.
Au revoir. Bye.